Hi guys, welcome back. So today we're going to be having a look at Billbergia, which is a genre of our different bromeliads. These ones grow in nice long cylindrical form, and they also grow in some open vase type forms. They grow in nice clumps, and some of them grow just as an individual. But caring for them is pretty simple. If you want a really large display, something like one of these types on the far side of the property, or something like this, a large big clump, then you're going to need to do a few different things in order to make that happen. So the easiest technique that I find when it comes to Billbergias to make them clump, if they're a clumping form, and that's to cut down in between the mum and the pup and leave the pup in situ instead of taking the mum and pup and separating them. I find that if you cut down and leave the mum in place, mum will then produce another pup for you in the same pot, and then you'll end up with a clumping type of display versus all the individual ones. Billbergias seem to do better when they do grow in the company of another Billbergia, so I like to grow them together in pots and let them clump up into much larger displays. So as the displays get bigger and bigger, it's a matter of just upsizing them to the next pot up. And what I like to do is, while I'm doing that up potting into the next size part, that's when I would do the fertilizing as well. So I tend to fertilize them in the pot, halfway down in their roots as well as just a little bit on top. But if I'm putting a new mix on top, like I'm going to do with this one, it contains a natural fertilizer in a compost, so it doesn't require any additional fertilizer in the top level, but it does require it down in the roots to make them pup. So this plant's advanced, and it's got a couple of mums, 3 mums in it, and there are some little babies already growing around the bottom, but it does need to go into the next size pot. So this is a 180, so I want to upsize it to a 200, which is this guy here, and it's a bromeliad pot with lots and lots of holes in the bottom of it. So what I do is, in the new pot, put the potting mix down the bottom. To that I will add just a teaspoon of the slow release fertilizer for these guys, and then removing the mum and the babies all together from their other pot, like so. Just get rid of half of that potting mix around the bottom, it's not needed. Okay, so once that's been shaken off, then they just need to be stabilized in the larger pot with some additional fertilizer around their roots, and then we just put the new bark over the top. And the new bark that I use, as I've said before, contains compost, and so compost feeds the plants as well. Once it's stabilized in the new pot, going around the outside and making sure that all of the mums are in a nice upright position, and sorry the camera's not pointing down at the moment, it's tracking around the top. Once they're all in a nice upright position, that way they can collect water, but there's enough space around the outside for those pups to continue to grow. It's a matter of then either putting a hanger back over them and going between each of the mums. This is a 3-pronged hanger, so between each of the mums' lower leaves to help hold it in place, or using some skewers as well to hold the plants in an upright position until they create more roots to hold the plants up, which will happen over time. If you're not hanging the Billbergias, and some of these bigger ones that are in the really large pots don't get hung, then it's a matter of just putting a few skewers in place, just like these ones, just to ensure that the plant is upright so that it gets all of its nutrients from the water as it gets watered. Just popping the skewers down to the base just to hold mum in an upright position. Alright, so that's how we go about repotting our big Billbergias. So this one's not one of my tallest ones. Some of the taller ones are huge, so big that I can't put them into hangers. This would be an example of one that won't get hung up. It'll need to go into another pot. But what it does have is these surface roots. This is a mum in the center, 2 babies on the outside. Now I could cut them and separate them and put them into individual pots if I've got the space for thousands and thousands of pots, which I don't. So again, going into a 200 pot, because here's the rest of its belongings. This particular one is Kawana Island Fire, and it just needs to have all its hangers removed. So these little hanger clips which get stuck on the outside edges, lips of your pots, get really difficult to remove, but if you snap them from the inside out, it makes it a lot easier getting them off, especially when you're doing hundreds at a time, and that's how you remove them versus trying to unclip it from the lip onwards. Alright, so I've got a few skewers for this one, and this is the mum. Now mum, as you see, is in a way smaller pot in comparison to what it's going to go into. So what I'm going to do is get some of the potting mix. So I have some of the potting mix. Now the potting mix is what I get mixed up at my local landscaper, and it contains 1 metre, so it's a fairly easy ratio for me. I get 1 metre of the pine fines or soft fall pine natural bark. I then also get 1 metre of the composted material, which is called NutriBark, so it's composted down bark that's left for over 12 months. And then on top of that I get an extra third of builder's sand, and so the silica helps for the plants to grow, but it also makes the pot heavy so that they're not tipping over, and it also allows for a lot of free drainage. Now over periods of a couple of years this breaks down quite a lot and becomes quite compact in the pots, which is why these whole bromeliads around me, and there are thousands of them, all get repotted every couple of years so that they're not in a really old mix. So back to the Billbergia that I've got here. So taking it out of its pot, as I said, this one is Island Fire, and so there's an old mum here which I will remove. Normally I would probably save it, but there's enough of these ones. So a simple twist will break off your mums. That one's gone. So it still leaves me a really good healthy large mum, 2 babies beside it, and I've got another handful as well. So here's the 200 pot with potting mix down in the bottom of it. Once again, around the root area is where I'll add the fertilizer. This particular plant is about 40 centimeters tall, which why it needs a heavier base for it to stop it from falling over. It goes into the pot, leaving enough space. A couple of fingers I use as a guide on the outside that allows for babies to grow. And then I'll take the other section, which is the second mum with its 2 babies, and I'm going to place that on the other side of it, quite in tight together. So I've got 2 mums towards the centre, and all the babies are around the outside to continue to grow and expand, and then they'll mature and they'll continue to grow out the pot. From there we just simply fill it back up with more potting mix. And again, sorry that the camera is focusing on me and not down low, but adding the extra mix all the way around it and pushing it down so that it's nice and firm. Any extra old roots can be cut off because they will regrow, so that's okay. Billbergias can be grown as epiphytes as well. They don't have to be grown in pots. They do really well in trees, secured in forks of trees. Just add a little bit of cocoa peat fibre and wrap them up and put them in the middle of or tie them to a tree branch, but they just need to be kept in an upright position as they grow. So this is quite a big pot. It's not the biggest one, but it is still a fairly large pot, which could easily be split into several. Now, Billbergias can be susceptible to soft scale. They need a lot of airflow, which is why we do need to separate them every few years so that we can pull out the old mums and allow the babies to continue to grow with lots of airflow. They need a lot of light to bring out their nice intense colour, and a good winter cool period as well. So that's the pot that's been completed, but the mums are still attached to the babies, and so that's when the knife comes in handy. Just a serrated knife or a blade, and then just cutting down as close to mum as you can until you feel that you've separated that mum away from the pup. Once that's happened, you just push a bit of potting mix down between the mum and that baby, and that way they're separated, and mum will then continue to give you some more babies. Alright, so then all we just need to do is add a few skewers to this one to get it in an upright position. So they just go down the edge of the pot, pushing up against the mum on an angle so that it keeps it upright, and then from there this plant can go onto a flat surface. I'm going to not hang this one, it's too large, not to mention heavy. And so that one is finished, ready to be put in its place. And this particular one likes a lot of sunshine, so that's where that's going. Now the thing about doing Billbergias, if you hybridize, which is a great thing to do, and it's easy enough for most of us to do, if you've got a large collection, is to collect the seed. So for me, seed is growing in my main garden. See if it lets me, it will. Okay. So this is a big Billbergia, this is Purple Rain, and Purple Rain has already flowered. Just going to remove the seed pod, bring it over so you can have a look at it. So this is the flower or the inflorescence. This is where the seed grows, and if you can notice, there's one distinctly different seed. Nice purple one, that's full of seed. So out of the whole head that was hybridized, there is one pod of seed. So there's not a lot of flowers or seed that's produced when you do hybridization, especially when you're using hybrids that have been crossed several times. Some of them won't hybridize it at all, but if you're lucky enough to get one to hybridize with, like this one has done, then you can take that off and collect the seed. You'll probably get about 50 seeds from that one to grow on. So they need to be treated for scale. We do that 3 times a year because it gets repeated. We spray them the first time just as we're potting them up around the springtime, and then 2 weeks later to break the breeding cycle of any scale on the plant. So that's for soft scale or hard scale, or fly speck is what it's commonly called as well. So it's a hard scale as well, black one. So we do, the entire nursery gets done, and it gets done at the beginning of September, and then 2 weeks later, and then as we repot, every single plant needs to be sprayed. That way you're constantly breaking any breeding cycle, and if you bring new plants in, they also need to be quarantined, sprayed, treated before you start mixing them in with your collection, to ensure you have a nice healthy breeding stock or growing garden stock. And that's about it, the easy bit. They need lots of light, they need lots of water, and then they'll develop their gorgeous colours. And that's about all I can share with you about Billbergias. Happy gardening. Bye now.